They didn't have the internet, and they slept better than we do. The modern world has given us comfort, medicine, and instant access to information, but it has taken away something fundamental: healthy and natural sleep. We go to bed after midnight, scrolling through news feeds, and wake up to an alarm clock, feeling broken and unrested. We think that 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep is the gold standard to strive for, but it is almost unattainable. Medieval people, living in conditions that would seem unbearable to us, possessed the secret to perfect rest. Their approach to sleep was so different that it may seem strange to modern people, but it holds the key to understanding what we have lost. We will immerse ourselves in the silence of the medieval night to understand how our ancestors achieved what we cannot achieve with sleeping pills and meditation apps. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn why waking up in the middle of the night was considered normal and even beneficial, and how this forgotten sleep pattern can change your perception of rest. The main secret of medieval sleep, which modern science is rediscovering, is its biphasic or segmented structure. This fundamental rhythm of rest was not a cultural quirk, but a natural state of human beings for millennia. It was only with the advent of affordable artificial lighting that this natural model began to disappear. People of that era did not sleep for 8 hours straight, as doctors prescribe for us today, but followed a more complex cycle. Their night's rest was divided into two separate but interrelated periods. Between these phases of sleep lay a period of calm and conscious wakefulness, which played an important role in their lives. This model is known to historians as segmented sleep, and in documents from that era, its parts were simply called first sleep and second sleep. Modern research in chronobiology confirms that in the absence of artificial light, the human body naturally tends toward this intermittent pattern. This is not a disorder, but our biological norm. This pattern was not the result of insomnia or restlessness, but a harmonious response of the body to the change from day to night. In a world where life came to a standstill at sunset, the body and mind obeyed the natural signals of the environment. The absence of bright light in the evening allowed the brain to produce melatonin, gradually preparing a person for sleep. With the onset of thick darkness, about 2 hours after sunset, people went to bed. They fell asleep quickly and easily, exhausted by the day's physical labor. This first sleep lasted about 4 hours and was the deepest and most restorative. It was during this first phase of sleep that the body went through the stages of slow-wave sleep, which are responsible for physical regeneration. During this time, muscles recovered, tissues healed, and the immune system was strengthened. It was a period of almost complete oblivion, necessary for physical survival. Waking up in the middle of the night, around midnight or 1 a.m., was a completely normal and expected event. It was not abrupt or alarming, like our stress-induced awakenings. People smoothly transitioned from deep sleep to a state of quiet, calm wakefulness. This period, lasting from 1 to 3 hours, did not cause panic or desperate attempts to fall asleep again immediately. No one considered it insomnia. On the contrary, this time was perceived as a gift. It was considered special, quiet, and productive. In this nighttime silence, free from the hustle and bustle of the day, people found time for themselves. Many used these hours for prayer and spiritual reflection, believing that at this time the connection with higher powers was especially strong. Others simply sat by the dying hearth, analyzing the past day and making plans for the future. It was also a time for communication and intimacy between spouses, a rare opportunity to be alone in crowded homes. Some engaged in quiet activities. Women could spin or mend clothes by moonlight, while scholars and literate people could read and write. This hour was an integral and valuable part of the night. This practice was so widespread that it is mentioned in hundreds of historical documents throughout Europe. References to two dreams can be found in court records, medical treatises, personal diaries, and even classical literature. It was a universal cultural norm, understood by everyone from peasants to kings. To a medieval person, the idea of 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep would have seemed as strange and even unnatural as the idea of deliberately waking up in the middle of the night to work or pray seems to us. Their world was different, and their sleep reflected that measured, natural rhythm. Understanding this fact completely changes our view of what constitutes proper sleep. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about the possibility of returning to such a sleep pattern in the modern world? Write about it in the comments. With the onset of twilight, daily life in a medieval settlement or castle did not just slow down. It practically came to a complete standstill. The sounds of daytime labor, the banging of hammers, the creaking of carts, the hubbub of voices were replaced by silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the sounds of nature. In the absence of ubiquitous electricity, night regained its primal power. The only sources of light were the living fire in the fireplace, thin, tarred torches, or very expensive wax candles. All these dim, flickering lights were powerless against the encroaching darkness. They created small islands of light in an ocean of darkness, to which people submitted without complaint, following this ancient rhythm. Bedtime came very early by our standards, shortly after sunset. Usually between 8 and 9 o'clock in the evening, most people were already in bed. This was dictated not only by darkness, but also by deep physical exhaustion. A whole day filled with hard, continuous work in the fields, in a craft workshop, or on the farm perfectly prepared the body for rest. This honest fatigue was the best sleeping pill imaginable. People did not need to resort to relaxation rituals. Their very lives were the perfect preparation for sleep. The first sleep, which in scientific treatises of the time was called pes primus somnus, was the strongest, deepest, and most continuous. It came quickly and was practically devoid of dreams. It was a phase of complete immersion, a time when the body took its toll. It was during this period that the body restored the physical strength expended during a long day of work. The brain entered a phase of slow delta sleep, which is responsible for the most important regeneration processes. During this time, muscle tissue was restored, bones were strengthened, and the immune system was reinforced. It was during the first sleep that key, vital processes of the body's recovery took place. The body got a well-deserved rest from the day's exertions, and the mind, tired from solving simple and specific tasks, was easily freed from worries. It was a time of almost complete oblivion, necessary for physical survival. This sleep was so important for a person's ability to function the next day that interrupting it was considered extremely undesirable. Waking someone up during their first sleep without a good reason was a serious offense. People instinctively understood the value of this period. Therefore, they tried to finish all important tasks before complete darkness fell. They had to feed the livestock, fetch water, and prepare everything for the morning. This was done so that nothing could interfere with this first, most important stage of nighttime rest. But what did they do during this mysterious period in the middle of the night? The answer to this question reveals a completely different attitude towards sleep, which we will discuss in the next chapter. The period of wakefulness between two sleeps, known in historical texts as the night watch, was a unique and deeply valued time that medieval people used to great advantage. It was an hour of absolute silence, when the external, bustling world came to a complete standstill. In this silence, the inner world of a person, on the contrary, awakened to deep reflection and contemplation. This state had nothing to do with our restless nighttime awakenings, full of anxiety and attempts to fall asleep again. Scientific research shows that during this period, the body's levels of prolactin, a hormone that promotes feelings of calm and peace, increased. It was a natural meditative state, not a pathology. During this quiet, secluded hour, people engaged in important activities that had no place in the hustle and bustle of the day. It was a time when one could hear oneself, one's thoughts, and one's soul. For many, it became the most productive and meaningful time of the day. Prayers and spiritual practices played a huge role at this time. It was believed that the silence of the night brought heaven closer and made prayer more effective. In monasteries, monks rose punctually for midnight service, matins, filling the cold stone vaults with hymns. Lay people found a secluded corner in their homes for personal communication with God. They could read prayers by the dim light of smoldering coals in the hearth, or by the light of the moon shining through a small window. This practice gave them spiritual strength and comfort. It was also an ideal time for intellectual activity, reflection, and planning. In the absolute silence of the night, free from distractions, the mind gained a special clarity. It was possible to calmly and unhurriedly reflect on the past day, analyze one's actions and decisions. It was during these hours that people made plans for tomorrow, thought through complex economic issues, or simply dreamed. Spouses could talk quietly, discuss family matters, or resolve conflicts without the risk of being overheard. It was precious time for intimate closeness, both spiritual and physical, in crowded homes where privacy was a luxury. Some used this hour for quiet, practical tasks that did not require bright light. Women could check on sleeping children and elderly people, tuck them in, or throw some wood on the fire. They could do small handicrafts that could be done almost by touch, such as spinning or sorting wool. Men could go out into the yard to check that the gates were securely locked, or to make sure that the livestock was all right. Others simply sat by the fire, lost in thought, enjoying the rare moments of complete peace. It was a personal, unguarded time that belonged only to the person themselves, their thoughts, and their soul. After an hour or two of quiet and productive wakefulness, people began to feel a natural, gentle drowsiness again. It was not a sudden fatigue, but a smooth, peaceful desire to return to a state of rest. Having received a mental respite, the body was ready for the final stage of nighttime recovery. They returned to bed without resistance to immerse themselves in the second sleep. This sleep was strikingly different from the first. It was no longer as deep and serene, but lighter, and often accompanied by vivid, complex, and memorable dreams. It was during this phase that the brain was actively working, transitioning into what is known as rapid eye movement, REM sleep. This was a time not so much for the body as for the mind. Medieval people often attach great importance to these morning dreams, considering them prophetic or full of symbolism. The second sleep lasted until dawn, usually until 5 or 6 in the morning, depending on the time of year. It served a completely different but no less important function than the first. If the first sleep was a workshop for repairing the body, the second was a workshop for organizing the mind. It was during this time that the brain processed the information received during the day and consolidated memory. Impressions, skills, and knowledge were transferred from short-term memory to long-term memory. Modern research fully confirms that the rapid eye movement REM phase, rich in dreams, predominates in the morning hours. Waking up after the second sleep was the culmination of this natural process and was strikingly different from ours. It was not an event, but a process, natural, smooth, and gradual. People woke up with the first, palest rays of the sun and the first sounds of the awakening world. There was no sharp, deafening ringing of an alarm clock that jolts modern people out of sleep, causing a stress reaction. Instead, light slowly filled the room, and the body and mind were given time to transition smoothly and calmly from a state of rest to active activity. Such an awakening did not cause stress, but gave a feeling of freshness and readiness for a new day. Ultimately, this two-phase sleep pattern perfectly matched the natural cycles of the human body. It was not just a habit, but a perfect system refined by evolution. This system allowed the body and mind to get exactly the kind of rest they needed at different stages of the night. Thus, physical recovery and mental processing of information were elegantly divided into two specialized periods. This ensured that by morning, a person was restored in both body and soul. It was a harmony that we, with our monolithic and often interrupted sleep, have almost completely lost. How much more productive do you think a person's day could be if they woke up so naturally and without stress? In the next chapter, we will learn about the sleeping conditions of medieval people and why this also contributed to their healthy sleep. To a modern person, a medieval bedroom, even in the home of a relatively wealthy townsman, would seem the height of asceticism and discomfort. We are accustomed to comfort, soft mattresses, and personal space. However, it was precisely this apparent simplicity and naturalness of the environment that paradoxically contributed to deep and healthy sleep. In medieval conditions, the human nervous system was not overloaded with the excessive stimuli that surround us today. The absence of bright screens, constant noise, and clutter created a calm environment. This uncomplicated setting was ideally suited for a natural transition to sleep. Beds, if they were present in the home at all, were extremely simple in design, most often consisting of a wooden frame. This frame could be a primitive structure on legs or a more complex structure with a canopy in the homes of the nobility. Its main function was to raise the sleeping person above the cold and dirty floor. In the homes of wealthy people, luxurious mattresses stuffed with goose down or feathers were placed on such a frame. These were real luxury items, available only to a very small circle of the population. However, the vast majority of medieval inhabitants slept on much more modest mattresses. These mattresses, known as mattresses, were filled with whatever was at hand: straw, dried hay, or sheep's wool. Although these fillings were hard by our standards, they provided good ventilation and prevented the body from overheating. They also supported the natural position of the spine, preventing back pain. The concept of a private, separate bedroom was only available to the highest nobility and kings, who could afford entire suites of rooms. Even in castles and wealthy estates, members of the same family often shared common quarters. For most medieval people, however, individual sleeping space was an unattainable dream. Most families slept together in one common room, which served as a living room, dining room, and workshop during the day. Often all family members, and sometimes their guests, shared one large bed. This was due not only to a lack of space, but also to the need to keep warm in poorly heated dwellings. Servants and workers living in the house slept in more modest places, on benches, chests, or directly on the floor by the hearth. This communal living of many people in one room provided a sense of security and collective warmth, which was vital in cold stone or wooden houses. Winter nights were long and frosty, and the proximity of other bodies helped to keep warm. In a medieval bedroom, there was virtually nothing superfluous that could distract or stimulate. The absence of elaborate furniture, mirrors, paintings, and bright decorations created a minimalist environment. This helped calm the mind before going to sleep. The only entertainment before bedtime, apart from natural communication, could be an oral story told by older family members. These could be fairy tales, legends, or stories about the events of the day. A quiet lullaby for children was also a common ritual. Such activities calmed the nervous system rather than stimulating it, as modern gadgets and televisions do. The absence of visual and mental noise allowed the brain to transition smoothly from daytime activity to nighttime rest. This created ideal conditions for falling asleep quickly and deeply. One of the key but often overlooked factors contributing to the highest quality of sleep in the Middle Ages was the almost complete absence of light pollution. Night in that world was truly dark, the kind most of us have never seen. It was this deep, impenetrable darkness that allowed the human body to function in perfect harmony with its natural settings. In response to the absence of light, the brain began to produce melatonin unimpeded. This sleep hormone is the main conductor of nighttime recovery. It doesn't just cause drowsiness, it triggers a cascade of regeneration processes throughout the body. Any artificial lighting in that era was an exceptional luxury, not an everyday occurrence. It was expensive, inefficient, and used extremely sparingly. This made darkness the natural state of nighttime for the vast majority of people. Expensive wax candles, which gave off an even and relatively bright light, were only available to the upper classes and were mainly used in churches. Their light was a symbol of wealth and divine presence. Ordinary people had to make do with much more primitive sources of light. Most often, their homes were lit by thin splinters of dry wood, known as tinder or smoky tallow candles. These devices gave off a very dim, constantly flickering light with a warm, reddish hue. More importantly, they burned out quickly, and people did not use them unless absolutely necessary. Thus, with the onset of night, virtually the entire world was plunged into natural, primeval darkness. This sharp contrast between light day and dark night was the main tuning fork that set the human internal clock. This regime of light and darkness perfectly synchronized circadian rhythms with the natural cycle. The body received a clear and unambiguous signal. When the sun sets, it's time to get ready for rest. The gradual fading of light served as a natural trigger for slowing down all the body's systems. There was no blue light from screens, which in our world tricks the brain into thinking that the day is still going on. Similarly, the first rays of dawn served as a natural alarm clock, gently and gradually bringing a person out of sleep. This smooth transition from rest to wakefulness was physiologically correct. It eliminated the stress we experience from the sharp ringing of an alarm clock in a dark room. Even the only variable source of nightlight, the moon, played an important role in this order. Its cycles created an additional monthly rhythm in people's lives. They lived not only by the sun, but also by the moon. On full moon nights, it was much lighter, allowing people to work outside longer, travel, or hold nighttime celebrations. Moonlight was the natural streetlight of the pre-industrial era. On moonless nights, the darkness was absolute, promoting particularly deep and uninterrupted sleep. How much do you think modern light pollution in cities affects our health? In the next chapter, we will look at how physical labor affected sleep quality. The lives of the vast majority of people in the Middle Ages were inextricably linked to hard, continuous physical labor. It was not an option or a hobby, but a fundamental condition for survival, dictated by the very nature of life. Every day from dawn to dusk was devoted to work that required complete dedication. Peasants, who formed the basis of society, spent the entire daylight hours in the fields doing exhausting work. They plowed the land by hand with primitive plows, sowed and harvested crops using only sickles and scythes. This monotonous but extremely energy-intensive activity involved all muscle groups. Craftsmen in the cities also did not have an easy life, spending long hours in their workshops, a blacksmith at a red-hot forge, a stonemason working with heavy blocks, or a carpenter working with hand tools. All of them relied solely on their physical strength. Their bodies were their main working tools. Even the life of a soldier, which might be considered more varied, consisted of constant physical exertion, long training sessions with heavy weapons, marches of many kilometers in full gear, and the construction of fortifications were their daily routine. This daily physical exertion served as a natural and most effective regulator of sleep. By the end of such a day, the human body was truly and deeply exhausted. It was not a slight drowsiness, but a total depletion of physical resources. Muscles that had suffered thousands of micro-injuries during the day required immediate rest and recovery. This physiological need for sleep was so powerful that it became practically irresistible. People did not need to count sheep, drink herbal teas, or use complex relaxation techniques. Their bodies themselves sent a powerful signal about the need to transition into a state of rest. As a result, they fell asleep almost instantly and very soundly as soon as their heads touched the straw pillow. The process of falling asleep was not a long struggle with thoughts, but a natural and quick shutdown. It was a well-deserved reward for a hard day's work. The key difference lies in the very nature of fatigue when compared to modern fatigue. Today's fatigue is often mental or emotional in nature, caused by stress and information overload. We feel exhausted, but our bodies are full of unspent energy. Medieval fatigue, on the other hand, was predominantly physical, honest, and pure. It was not accompanied by anxiety, worry about the future, or nervous system overexcitement, which so often prevent us from falling asleep. Thoughts were simple and clear, and the body asked for only one thing: rest. This healthy fatigue led straight to deep and truly restorative sleep. It left no room for stress-induced insomnia. Having received what it needed, complete physical release, the body willingly plunged into the most healing phases of sleep. Thus, this lifestyle created a nearly perfect balance between activity and rest. All the energy accumulated by the body during the night and obtained from food was completely expended during the daylight hours. At night, a well-deserved and physiologically necessary period of recovery began. This natural and continuous cycle of energy expenditure and accumulation is the basis of healthy sleep. In the modern world, however, we have largely lost this harmony. Our sedentary but mentally stressful lifestyle has disrupted this ancient balance, leaving us tired but unable to sleep. Medieval man lived in a world that was almost completely free from the kind of stress we now call information stress. His mental space was not assaulted by a constant stream of data, opinions, and alarming news. The information environment was sparse, slow, and mostly local. News traveled at the speed of a pedestrian or horseman, reaching remote settlements weeks or even months after the events. It mainly concerned global issues, wars, changes of rulers, natural disasters, and was perceived as something distant, almost abstract. This information rarely affected the daily life of the common person. In their world, there were no 24-hour news channels, endless social media feeds, or instant notifications on the screen. The constant stream of alarming information that keeps us chronically anxious today was simply impossible. Their minds were protected from this global noise by the natural barriers of time and distance. The concerns of medieval man were limited to his immediate surroundings, his village, his family, and his own household. The stresses he faced were real, tangible, and concrete. They were the threats of drought, sudden illness, or crop failure. These problems required immediate, practical action, not endless reflection and anxiety about what was happening on the other side of the world. If a fence was broken, it was repaired. If livestock fell ill, it was treated. Stress was a signal to act, not a reason for passive worry. When the sun went down, active work stopped, and with it went the worries of the day. The day had a clear beginning and an even clearer end. Night brought not only darkness, but also mental silence. It was this lack of constant mental stimulation before bedtime that allowed the nervous system to naturally calm down and relax. There was no need to check work emails, respond to urgent messages, or watch an exciting TV series that stirred the imagination. The evening was a time to slow down, not speed up. Instead, the evening hours were devoted to calm, measured activities. This could be a time for quiet conversations with the family, for doing crafts together, or for repairing tools by the light of the hearth. These monotonous, rhythmic activities had a meditative effect in themselves, reducing stress levels. This information vacuum, which would seem unbearably boring to us, accustomed as we are to constant stimulation, was in fact a great boon to mental health. It reliably protected the brain from cognitive overload, which is one of the main causes of sleep problems today. The brain had the opportunity to cool down and process the impressions of a simple, understandable day. Thanks to this mental calm, the transition to sleep was natural and easy. There was no need to fight obsessive thoughts or anxious scenarios running through the head. As a result, sleep came quickly, was deep, and was not interrupted by the inner restlessness that is so familiar to modern people. Daily life in the Middle Ages was strictly structured and subject to two main, unshakable forces: the all-encompassing rhythm of nature and the strict order of religion. These two pillars shaped not only the daily routine, but also people's worldview, their sense of time and place in the universe. They brought clarity and predictability to a world that, despite all its physical difficulties, was psychologically more orderly. Sunrise and sunset were absolute and indisputable boundaries of the working day, set by nature itself. With the first rays of sunlight barely breaking through the morning fog, work began. With the onset of thick twilight, when it became inefficient and dangerous to work, it inexorably came to an end. This natural framework served as a reliable safeguard against overwork, preventing labor from encroaching on hours intended for rest and family. The day belonged to work and the night to rest. This boundary was sacred and almost never violated. The changing seasons dictated not only the types of agricultural work, but also the entire way of life, including food, clothing, and even social interactions. Spring was a time of sowing and hard work in the fields, filled with hopes for the future harvest. Summer was a period of the most intense, exhausting labor from dawn to dusk. Autumn brought with it the harvest and preparations for winter, and the long winter evenings became a time for quiet crafts, repairing tools, and relaxing by the hearth. This eternal, predictable cycle created a sense of deep stability and understandable order. People felt part of something bigger and unchanging. Against the backdrop of this natural rhythm, another, man-made but no less important sound could be heard: the voice of church bells. It was their measured ringing that marked the time throughout the day, serving as the only publicly available timekeeper. This sound was a constant backdrop to life, its sonic backbone uniting the entire community. The bells called people to prayer, dividing the day into clear, meaningful segments. Canonical hours. The morning service, matins, long before dawn, and the evening service, vespers, at sunset served as a kind of spiritual framework that organized the day. They were like sunrise and sunset in a person's spiritual life, marking the beginning and end of their daily labors before God. These rituals helped people transition smoothly from one activity to another, from work to prayer, from wakefulness to rest. Each ring of the bell was a reminder of its place in the daily cycle, that there is a time for everything. This created a sense of order and a deep, comforting predictability. As evening fell, it was time for the rituals that ended the day, which psychologists today would call sleep hygiene. These were not just unconscious habits, but meaningful, repetitive actions that separated the cares of the day from the peace of the night. They served as a powerful psychological anchor, signaling the transition to rest. Evening prayer, whether communal in church or quiet at home with the family, was the most important of these rituals. It allowed people not only to ask for something, but also to reflect on the past day, let go of their worries, and place themselves under the protection of higher powers. It was an act of mental and spiritual purification, freeing the mind for peaceful sleep. In addition to prayer, there were other important family rituals. Extinguishing the fire in the hearth together, locking the doors and shutters, and having a final quiet conversation. These simple, repetitive evening activities served as a clear physical and psychological signal to the body. They literally said, the day is over, the work is done, now is the time for safety and rest. Such a measured, predictable, and ritualized life created a strong sense of stability and psychological comfort. The world may have been harsh and full of dangers, but its internal order was clear, understandable, and unchanging. This eliminated the anxiety of uncertainty that is so characteristic of our time. The complete absence of the chaos of multitasking and exhausting rush that have become the norm today contributed to a deep inner calm. Everything and every action had its own designated time, and people did not try to do several things at once. This allowed them to focus completely on the present moment, reducing mental stress. Ultimately, the peace of mind gained during the day was one of the most important and effective conditions for healthy and sound sleep. A peaceful mind was not tormented by anxious thoughts, did not replay endless scenarios, and did not analyze past mistakes. It was ready to rest just like a body tired from the day. Ultimately, the fundamental and most profound secret of healthy sleep for medieval people lay in their complete, almost instinctive harmony with their own biological clocks. These complex internal mechanisms, which control all processes in the body without exception, worked like a perfectly tuned instrument. They did not try to establish a routine because their lifestyle itself was this routine in its purest form. Their existence was not just close to nature, it was an integral, organic part of it. People of that era were as integrated into daily and seasonal cycles as a tree rooted in the ground or an animal following the sun. It was not a conscious philosophy, but a simple and inevitable reality of their existence. They did not follow advice from books, let alone use sleep trackers to analyze their rest phases. They simply lived. Their bodies and minds received everything they needed to recover, not through effort, but through the absence of obstacles. Every aspect of their existence naturally contributed to maintaining and strengthening their innate circadian rhythms. This system was refined not by one generation, but by thousands of years of evolution. Our bodies still carry this ancient program, tuned to a world without artificial light and round-the-clock activity. Medieval man simply lived in complete accordance with this program, without violating its instructions. Going to sleep early in conditions of almost complete velvety darkness sent the most powerful signal possible to the brain to rest. This signal was not just visual, but comprehensive, accompanied by a drop in temperature and the fading of sounds. In response, the pineal gland, our brain's internal light sensor, began to actively produce melatonin. This so-called night hormone is the main conductor of our sleep. It not only causes natural, gentle drowsiness, but also commands every cell in the body to go into recovery and cleansing mode. It is thanks to this hormone that the body plunged into deep, healing rest, waking up with the first rays of the sun, rather than to a sudden, stressful alarm, triggered a reverse, equally important process. Morning light, especially its blue spectrum, is the most powerful natural stimulant. It suppressed the production of melatonin and commanded the adrenal glands to produce cortisol. This morning surge of cortisol, the wake-up hormone, is an absolutely healthy and necessary reaction. It provided energy, clarity of mind, and physical vigor for the entire day ahead. The entire hormonal background of a person worked like a clock, perfectly synchronized with the rotation of the planet. Even biphasic sleep itself perfectly matched the natural fluctuations of hormones throughout the night. Deep first sleep coincided with the peak of growth hormone, necessary for physical repair. And calm wakefulness between sleep cycles was often accompanied by peaks of prolactin, which gave a sense of peace and promoted contemplation. Intense physical activity, which occurred exclusively during daylight hours, served as another clear daytime signal to the body. It raised body temperature and increased metabolism, telling every cell, now is the time to work. In the evening, complete physical calm set in, which was an equally important nighttime signal. This sharp, unambiguous contrast between tension and relaxation created ideal conditions for the internal clock to function properly. The body had no doubt about which period it was in, wakefulness or rest. Modern people often blur these boundaries by exercising late at night or working at half speed during the day. Their diet also played a key, albeit unconscious, role in maintaining this ideal balance. Food was simple, natural, and strictly seasonal, which synchronized their metabolism with the environment. They ate what the land provided here and now, without preservatives or exotic products. Their diet lacked the artificial stimulants that are the norm today: caffeine, refined sugar, energy drinks. Dinner was light and, most importantly, early. This allowed the digestive system to finish its work well before bedtime, freeing up energy for nighttime recovery. The modern world, with its artificial light that turns night into day, has completely destroyed this natural, fragile synchronization. The blue light from our phone and computer screens sends a false signal to the brain that it is noon, suppressing melatonin production. This is the main reason why millions of people cannot fall asleep, even when they feel tired. Shift work schedules force people to stay awake when their bodies are literally screaming for sleep. The 24-hour availability of entertainment, information, and food erases the sacred boundary between day and night. We have created a world that is in a state of perpetual, artificial daylight. As a result, we live in a state of constant, exhausting conflict with our biorhythms in what is known as social jet lag. Our bodies try to follow the ancient natural cycles inherited from our ancestors, but modern society requires us to live according to a completely different, unnatural schedule. The price we pay for this deep-seated discord is widespread insomnia, chronic fatigue that even long sleep cannot relieve, and inexplicable anxiety. These are not just symptoms, but our bodies cry for help, for a return to harmony. We are trying to hack a system that took millions of years to create. The history of medieval sleep is not just an interesting historical fact, but an important and relevant reminder for all of us. It shows that you don't need sophisticated technology, smart gadgets, or powerful drugs to get a good night's sleep. Perhaps the wisest thing we can do is to stop fighting and listen to our own bodies. The ancient rhythms of nature have not disappeared. They still live within us, in every cell of our bodies. They patiently wait for us to create the right conditions for them, to reduce the amount of light in the evenings, to move more during the day, and to find time for silence. The secret of our ancestors' perfect sleep is still available to us today. Today we looked into the dark but peaceful nights of the Middle Ages and saw that our ancestors possessed the art of sleep that we have almost lost. Their two-phase sleep, living in harmony with the natural cycles of light and darkness, physical fatigue, and the absence of information noise created the ideal conditions for complete recovery. Their experience shows that the key to healthy sleep lies not in finding a magic pill, but in returning to a more natural lifestyle. Of course, we cannot completely abandon the benefits of civilization and return to the past. But we can learn from the wisdom of our ancestors. Reduce the amount of blue light in the evenings, try to live in accordance with natural rhythms, find time for physical activity, and create periods of silence and peace in our busy lives. Do you think modern people could return to a similar sleep pattern? And what would need to change in our lives to make that happen? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to learn more about how people lived and survived in different eras.